Today we'll understand what exactly the Aura framework is, how it fits into your Salesforce modern UI architecture, and how you can get started with building the responsive lightning components. So we'll also compare the Visualforce pages that we have built, how they differ from the Aura framework that we have, and touch based on when to choose which on a high level. As we move forward, then at the end, we'll also see how to migrate them. Basically, Aura is the framework that was launched initially to support the Lightning framework introduced by Salesforce. And that's why, even though this is a bit not completely outdated, I'll say, but this is the older version. We prefer using the LWC for most of the development now. But there are still components which are not completely supported in LWC, which is your Lightning Web Components. And because of that, you will feel you're still using both Aura as well as your Lightning framework. Now, this is similar to what we have seen in moving forward from your workflows to process builders to flows. We also have the triggers. So even though flows allows you to automate a lot of backend operations directly through point and click, we still write the triggers. And that is the same situation with your Aura and LWC. So most importantly, what we are going to cover is understanding your Lightning architecture itself. So you have been using Lightning. You use the Lightning app builder to design your Lightning record pages. You create the record pages, home pages, application pages, where they are designed. They are based on Lightning. When you log into Salesforce and you navigate around, you click on creation of the new account, contact, or you update existing list views. All this is Lightning. So the classic versus Lightning, it's still a question, but Classic was older UI and that was not very compatible with all the W3C standards and the DOM structures where you can easily manipulate and upgrade according to the industry standards. So because of that, the major challenge we used to follow was it was not mobile friendly. So mobile frameworks used to be completely different developed than the desktop applications. So it's a double work that I am doing. On top of that, not all the browsers will support the framework. So Visualforce had some issues with initially in the IE some versions. Then when it was launched, we also faced some issues with the Safari as well. So all these challenges were then overcome, and then finally we moved into the more responsive user interface, which is definitely from look and feel as well much better than your classic. That is your Lightning. So what this architecture is, what does Lightning mean? Then we'll talk about the Aura because Aura is purpose of Aura was to implement the Lightning architecture. Then we'll talk about SPA architecture. What exactly is a single page application architecture? Then component based architecture and responsive designs in Salesforce. So we have been talking responsive for a pretty long time now. What does this responsive actually mean? We are gonna deep dive. I'll provide extra resources to go through and understand these architectures further. If needed, let me know and we'll go again in deep. But at least a high level understanding is required for your AWC and Aura understanding. Then we'll also talk about building Aura components. So we'll build our first component, what it includes, the bundle of the Aura component, and then finally what is a Aura component library in Salesforce. And lastly, let's see some Aura versus Visualforce use cases. So when I should be using the basically Apex versus your Lightning or Aura versus your Visualforce, which is better? Why do we need two different flavors? All right. So let's start with the first one, and that is your Lightning framework. So Lightning makes it easier to build the responsive applications for any device. It's a modern UI framework that enhances user experience, helping you to build faster, more modular, and a component based development. It consists of several parts. One of that part is Aura. It has also the LWC and a responsive runtime environment. Now we have also the LWR that is launched to expose your Lightning outside your Salesforce. So to start with, let's go to the basic. The Lightning is future of Salesforce. So all new Salesforce innovation, all new changes are delivered and considered or designed based on focusing on your Lightning architecture only. So even though we still use the classic flavor, The new features are not compatible in Classic. There is no backward compatibility. All the new features are working in Lightning separately. Older versions which are in Classic, which are not yet migrated to the Lightning, they are still there. And that is why we are still wandering off with the Classic interfaces. You can gain a competitive advantage with the Lightning because they're very easy to use. A functionality of Lightning gives you more time to sell and get ahead of the competition because of the reduced development time. It also gives you a modern user experience. So the flexibility of Lightning allows you to customize your user experience and move around the way you want it. Basically, your teams are enabled to spend more time providing exceptional customer services and less time juggling around the technology tech and other applications. So, for example, if you look at from the user interface perspective, from the sales rep perspective, forget about from the developer perspective. The features on the left itself are sufficient to tell you or communicate to you how powerful Lightning has been. Previously, I used to just spend around a lot of time moving around and thinking about how to migrate all those things or how to easily improve the productivity of my sales reps. How can I make sure they are prioritizing and acting on the important work? Lightning gave us that interface, which allows us to focus more on critical and the time sensitive actions. Einstein was the cherry on the top because with Einstein, now you can get the recommendation. So the seller home that was launched, the home page for your sales app is completely giving you a 360-degree view of the customers, which customers I have not been in touch with for a very long time. What are the opportunities which I have already closed? What is the target or quota for this week or maybe in month? How many calls am I supposed to make? How many emails I'm supposed to write? How many of them are already done? How many are pending? All this gives you a quick summary into my day-to-day work. So making calls, taking notes, logging tasks, sending emails from a single page. So I'm working smarter with the built-in data scientist features, which delivers a personalized and a faster service to your sales reps. That was the purpose of your Lightning from the user experience perspective, from the point and click perspective, or rather, you can say from the end user perspective. Then it moved into backend. So, what do you mean by backend? So, Lightning includes the Lightning component framework and a lot of exciting tools for developers. It makes easier to build responsive applications compatible with any device. Lightning components gives us first a client and server framework that accelerates the development. Visualforce completely acts on server side, and that's where it was more of a performance heavy. While Lightning components with the Lightning or let's say the client server framework helped us to build or accelerate the development, and the application's performance is highly optimized. Basically, it is ideal for use with Salesforce mobile apps and Salesforce Lightning Experience because if you have seen majority applications nowadays, rather than being compatible with the desktop, I also expect them to compatible with my mobile devices. In fact, the Salesforce mobile app and the Lightning Experience are both built with the Lightning components only. So Lightning Web Components perform better. So LWC, as I mentioned, LWC performs better and are easier to develop compared to your Aura components. However, when you develop Lightning Web Components, you also need to use the Aura because as I discussed, LWC doesn't yet support everything that Aura does. Also, your Salesforce Lightning architecture is derived or is based on event-driven programming. It is used in many languages and frameworks such as JavaScript or if you have used your Java Swing. Both of them uses the event-driven programming, which means you write the handlers that respond to the interaction or action with the interface and events as they occur. So a component basically registers or that it might fire an event to its markup. Markup is your front end, which generates your user interface. And events are fired from JavaScript controllers and actions that are typically triggered by user who interacts with your front end user experience, or let's say user pages that you have built in. So basically, Lightning components are your top level containers. Under that, you'll have the markup, and that markup is ultimately calling either your client side or server side actions. Since it is now based on the HTML5 and JavaScript, it also supports the CSS3, and it is also based completely on the DOM. Any new enhancements or features, those are released according to the W3C standards onto the web development, those are automatically applicable to your Salesforce Lightning architecture as well. This also makes it very compatible with all the devices that we use, be it a desktop, a laptop, your phone, tablet, whether it's an Android or whether it's an MacBook, doesn't matter. Now it is much easier for me to navigate through these things. On top of that, Lightning includes multiple technologies. So it is not only giving you a flavor of a fast and a responsive development because of the features or the layers that it actually is equipped with, what makes it differentiating from the other frameworks in Salesforce. So Lightning components accelerate development and app performance, but they also provide you some standard inbuilt components to other developers and admins called as a reusable building blocks. So my Lightning experience on desktop as well as my Salesforce mobile app can both use the same frameworks. No need to redevelop anything. It also empowers. So for example, you use a Lightning app builder to design your record pages or to build your home pages. That is empowering your admins to directly build pages visually without code using off the shelf and custom built Lightning components. That's why we are talking about the app builder, because in the app builder, when you have the Lightning pages or record pages, you can embed your Lightning components in there. So make your Lightning components available in the Lightning app builder. So your administrator can simply drag and drop onto the user interfaces without any code. We have already done the coding behind. So either use the standard components or you can use the custom component. It also provides you the experience builder. So experience builder empowers to help build the communities. Basically the portals that we use to interact, the customer portals that we design. That too without any code. Again, using Lightning templates and components. So make your Lightning components available in Experience Builder, drag and drop them, and community are ready for usage. So administrators can also now build the community pages without any code. You don't need to wait on your JavaScript or Visualforce pages. And they are much more powerful looking at the overall interactions. More responsive, faster, and performance is also drastically different than what you can observe in the Visualforce side. So basically, it provides you the framework that is required, which is based on your SPN event-driven components. Second, lot of other tools to support and use the built-in or maybe the custom developed components, Lightning components, allowing you to simply use the drag and drop. So now we are moving into a no code. So where I want to just use the once develop and use multiple times. So I can use that anywhere. Base Lightning components, which provides you the support or foundation for starting your Lightning web components or maybe Lightning components. So ready to use components which you can directly leverage without writing much code. Similar to what we have seen in Visualforce, where we use the standard controllers. So in standard controllers, it was easy for me to build because everything was done on the Salesforce side. I was just leveraging what Salesforce has provided as a platform. The same thing is with your base Lightning components. So the components are already built in. You simply drag and drop, provide the attributes that it requires, and they are ready to go. On top of that, it also provides you the APIs, which are related to your user interface building. And you can also plug in the Apex for your server side processing. So it doesn't only have the client side, it also has the server side for it. And that is more efficient. It is not something that will directly impact the performance. Also, styling is most important in creating the user experience that we want to deliver to our end users. And that is why all the lightning components are provided or are enabled with a styling framework in Salesforce designed and developed for those specific components. That is called as a lightning design system. So the style sheets which are ready to use. Similar to base lightning components where you have components, you can simply use them as is. Lightning design system is easily enabling you that CSS part to be enabled into your component. Then you also have the support for the Visualforce development. So not only Visualforce, Lightning is supported on lot of other third party or inbuilt development tools as well. They are integrated into it. The extensions which helps you to do the proofreading, code reviews, enable the auto completions based on the components attributes. All these are very important from a developer perspective. So your Lightning app builder allows you to do the drag and drop kind of thing. Visual Studio enables you to just create or write the customized or tailored requirements to design those lightning components. And then you can again use the lightning app builder to drag and drop. You can also use the third party tools like a Sublime Text to develop it. So all these makes the lightning very strong. So lightning framework is basically the combination of all the frameworks which are designed to support the more responsive UI. That's it. That's the only thing that you need to remember. Now, definitely we are gonna talk about SPA event driven because these are the core concepts. Not only that, now you also need to start learning and digging more into what a DOM means. What are the elements in the DOM? Document object model, basically. Then JavaScript and HTML5. Because all the LWC or your Aura components, those are based on these frameworks, technologies. Now, that's fine. This is all Lightning, which we have already been using. But how that aligns with what I have that is called Aura framework. So your Aura framework, basically what happened was in the ever evolving landscape of your user experience development, we do no longer call it as a user interface development because we are providing that experience, the rich experience that your customers want. Salesforce recognized the need for the frameworks, those would offer enhanced flexibility, improved performance, and high developer productivity. And in order to meet these demands, Salesforce introduced Aura components. And then they later migrated or upgraded them to Lightning Web Components, representing a shift towards the modern UI development paradigms. So every technology needs to align with the market trends. That is what Salesforce is also doing. That's why we have shifted from your workflows to process builders to flows to triggers to now Aura to LWC, LWR. And maybe there might be some new framework for the user experience as we move forward with it. But Aura basically is nothing but a framework introduced by Salesforce in 2014. So in 2014, they introduced the first time Aura framework. And the purpose was building dynamic web applications. So if we have observed the from the moment we started talking about Lightning and all those things, it is all about responsive client side, server side, event driven, SPAs. What technologies I need or tech stack that I might need to explore is HTML5, CSS, JavaScript, AngularJS, all those things, which are highly used in web application development. And that is why 2014, when they launched the dynamic web applications, they were supported using the Aura frameworks. It's an older approach and is based on the proprietary framework. It was created by Salesforce. So as they utilize particular architectural principles and design patterns, supported within Salesforce. Based on typical, or let's say our governing architecture pattern will be the same. But on top of that, to make sure they are compatible with the Salesforce, they have just tailored them to fit the frameworks. So it is a bit complex to immediately get into the framework, but definitely it offers you very versatile features and capabilities. It offers you a structured approach to the UI development, also allowing my developers to create reusable and modular components. A most important thing in any architecture is modularity and reusability. Are you writing code every time, or is that code reusable in other parts of your application as well? Aura components consist of markup file that defines the UI. So if you remember in Visualforce also we had a markup. So we started off with the tag based. Everything that is tag based, that is called as a markup language. HTML is also a markup language. Why? We use the tags in there. Visualforce is also a markup language. Similarly, even in Aura also we use the markup file. So markup file is where you define the your components, attributes, and then in the backend you provide the code behind. And that is why they also follow the same MVC pattern and support the event-driven programming, enabling flexible and more interactive applications compared to your Visualforce. So Aura components are compatible with multiple platforms because of the global support of all these frameworks and making them versatile for your development. You can fit in for any type of requirements, tailored to the requirements which business wants. And they empower you to create those engaging and customizable user interfaces. So if you read the text on here, it was supposed to be client side, but it is also an event driven. Event driven also disconnects your complete dependency. It gives you a more controlled way of communication between the different components within your application. Basically, event driven architecture is where or how your components communicate with each other. So the Lightning component framework that was initially built, that was also on top of your Aura framework. And that's why you will see many references of Aura within Lightning APIs. And as it uses the component-based structure and it leverages both the client and server side processing through HTML5, JavaScript, and your Apex. So we still use Apex to use anywhere you use server side Apex. There is no other exception. But overall, why they wanted to use the Aura in the first place? It is fine. It's a component based, event driven, client side, server side, supports everything. That is fine. But why? So there are a couple of reasons when we started off with the Aura framework. The first thing was revolutionization of the user interface, the experience that was delivered in Classic versus the experience that I am giving to my end customers through my Lightning interface itself. Log into Salesforce and try to use the Classic versus the Lightning. I mean, we have grown up in Classic as well, so we are used to it. But if you look at the user interfaces or the way we navigate around in the applications, it is much smoother and easy to find any information that I require in Lightning compared to your Classic interfaces. So when they launched Aura, what they did was they did not only revolutionize the UI, but at the same time, they made sure they follow the principle of the self-contained reusable units. Because out of the box components or anywhere, even when you started learning the admin, the first part that we learn about is configuration. Configuration is what? Point and click. And then we talk about the standard object and custom object. So every time, whenever you have a standard, we prefer using standard first, then we'll go for the custom. So every language provides you some base content, foundational components to speed up the development, basically. The ones which are frequently used and might be leveraged by the end developers. SPA architecture provides you the flexibility and reusability that you require. The components are rich in the user interfaces, plus compatible with any device. I don't have to write the separate code, much faster then. So my GTM is also reduced. And since they interact through the event driven is nothing but, if you have heard about the platform events, which we are definitely going to cover, the platform event and all these are based on the architecture called as a publisher and subscriber, which means what happens is usually you have someone who publishes your event, that there is a change. So this is a tower, assume. It says to common channel that there is a change in the account record. There are multiple subscribers who listen to this channel. As soon as they hear there is a change in an account record, they can pick up and they can apply to internal systems. This is very efficient because in this case, there is no point-to-point integration. Point-to-point integration means with each of the system. If this is my Salesforce, what happens is every time you have the change, you need to make changes to each of these individual systems. The mapping needs to be updated because it's a one-to-one connection. In this event driven, or also called as a pub sub, publisher and subscriber, you have a channel. Consider playing a radio. What happens? Someone is broadcasting on a common channel and we are tuning to that channel. So when you tune into that channel or the frequency, then only you can listen to the songs being broadcasted. That's a similar approach in publisher and subscriber. So you have a channel, you define it, and you publish the changes. All the systems who need the data from Salesforce, they will be subscribing. They'll pick the data that they want from there. I don't have to now worry about configuration too much. It's not a complete removal, but the tight coupling between the two systems is completely changed. It is much flexible even to onboard new systems or to disconnect the existing systems without disrupting your existing applications. So what are the key features in your Aura component? So Aura provides the component-based architecture we have seen. So component-based architecture means they are self-contained and reusable. The framework operates on client side, which means user interface is rendered in browser. That's why DOM is important. Because in order to handle the events or to get the value, we need to manipulate the DOM. Then you have the event-driven programming, where components can react to user interactions and the other events very easily. It uses a two-way data binding, which means changes in the data are automatically updated in the UI and so on, vice versa. Aura components are built using HTML and JavaScript. They are very easily upgradable with any new release or changes to these frameworks. The components can readily leverage the Lightning design system for styling and appearance, which is much easier for me rather than writing and uploading my own custom CSS. Definitely, you can still write the CSS and import it, but for the simple components, you do not need to write the CSS and import it. You can easily use the inbuilt CSS that Salesforce also leverages for their Lightning. And finally, Aura coexists with LWC. Aura and Lightning Web Components can coexist on the same page. So you can have a record page that has a one Aura component and another that is an LWC component. They do not have any disruptions with each other. And that is the most important point, coexistence with the LWC. Because similar to Classic and Lightning, as I mentioned, it is still some things are in Aura which are not yet supported or migrated fully into your Lightning application. Now, another thing, that is, whenever you create it, it is very important to use the namespace. So if you remember in Aura or Visualforce, do you remember what was the namespace that we used? I explained at that time as well. What was the namespace in Visualforce? When you design a Visualforce page, how do you define the component?
No, with an Apex page tag.
Apex page tag, correct? So Apex colon, you mention the name of the component, correct? Apex data table, Apex data grid, Apex panel grid. So what is that Apex? Apex is nothing but a namespace. So it's a namespace that is provided by Salesforce. So namespaces helps you bring the similar functions together. They also helps you to overcome the challenges of overlapping components. So for everything, we already have the namespaces. So for example, as we discussed, in Visualforce, you use Apex colon. That Apex colon means you're into the Apex namespace. And in that Apex namespace, there is the component called as a page, which has the attributes. And that's why this is also called as a markup language. Similar to how your XML is also a markup language. The tags, opening and closing tags, as soon as you see, that is classified mostly as a markup language. Similarly, in Aura also, you have lot of components that you can leverage. As we talked about, base lightning components. Plus, you can create your own custom components as well. And that is why it also supports many namespaces which are inbuilt in Salesforce. If your org doesn't define any namespace, standard namespaces are still used. So what are those standard namespaces which we will be starting off with? The first one is Aura itself. A component or a namespace that tells me this is a tag that is being used or referenced from my Aura library. So if you see on the right hand side, Aura component, Aura X, similar to how you have your Apex and page, which tells you this is a starting. HTML tells you this is a starting of my HTML markup language. XML tells me XML is a starting tag. Similarly, you have the Aura component that is your starting tag, which tells you this is where my component is kicked off. Top level component, we call it. Then you also have the specific components designed to support in this Aura. Force is one of these namespace. Very frequently we'll be using it. So similar to how we created forms in Visualforce, we can create using the force record view the forms for either gathering the data or displaying the data or manipulating your data. You can perform the DMLs then. You also have some unstyled components. So similar to again Visualforce. In Visualforce, we had the tables, right? Which are the different components that I can use to build the tables? How you can build a table in Visualforce?
Page block table.
Page block table,
Data table.
data table. You can also use Apex repeat,
Yeah.
correct? But what is the difference between all three of them? Page block table is highly styled. You don't need to do anything, correct? The styling is already applied to it. If you move to the data table, it is also styled, but compared to page block table, I can say it's almost 60-70% there. 30% still you need to do. While in Apex Repeat, it's completely up to you. You'll need to build the HTML and the table and TD and TR and all those stuff, and then build your table inside it. That is called unstyled components. So giving you base component doesn't mean I'm stopping you from building or overriding the component itself. I still need the flexibility to override on my own. And that is why Salesforce also provides you namespaces which will allow you to have the unstyled components and apply your own style sheets to them. So these unstyled UI components are all classified under UI. So whenever you understand there is a namespace, you will see anything namespace colon. So anything below that, besides that colon or prior to that colon is nothing but your namespace. In your managed packages also, to segregate the managed package code from your regular environment code or Salesforce platform code, there is a namespace that is allocated. Without namespace, you cannot even get the security review done for your App Exchange packages. So the managed packages needs the namespaces. Why they need namespaces? What if the same component exists? How they differentiate based on the namespace. Then you also have the custom styling to be applied, and that can be using the LTNG. Now these are two different namespaces. Remember, LTNG is for CSS and JavaScript. So LTNG require, that's the only tag it has, nothing else. No other tags are there in that namespace, but it is still there and it's important. And then rest of the components that we use, like your page block table, your panel grids, input field, output field, pick list, or let's say select option, select list, command buttons, command links. All these are your components. All such components are part of your Lightning namespace. So these are the styled components which are equipped with Salesforce styling and also with the attributes to be defined to use them flexibly. So they directly integrate into your Lightning design system. So we'll see the Lightning design system as well. But basically, these are the very frequently used namespaces. And we are going to use a combination of all of them. It's not all or none. You'll see Aura component. You will also see some places use post record view. We can also use the UI spinners. That is not part of your Lightning. Or I might require the LTNG require in some places where I'm loading the third-party JavaScript library. Or maybe I am just importing a CSS. Then I also have the Lightning. Lightning will be the very frequently used one. So we use Lightning as well as the Aura. So you have Lightning card, Lightning formatted email, formatted phone, which gives you the pre-formatted and validations based components. So basically, every component is a part of a namespace, which is used to group related components together. If your developer org has a namespace prefix set, you can use that namespace to access your component as well. Otherwise, if you create a component by default, it is C colon. C means custom. So it's a Lightning component that I have created as a custom. It's not a predefined component provided by Salesforce. Another component or application then can reference a component by adding your my namespace. So basically how you write it is, it's a simple syntax that we use. How you write? This is my namespace, colon, the name of the component that you want. Any component. It could be your Hello World component. It could be my sample component. Anything. But the most important part is this. It will be part of this. So if I create a custom component, usually you will see C and then name of component that you have. And that's why namespaces are very important. Specifically, if you use a LWC and Aura, everything is based in the namespace. So in your org, you can choose either the custom or you can use your standard namespaces as well. And as I mentioned, remember a namespace prefix is always required if you plan to package these components and put them as the Salesforce App Exchange package, managed package basically. Managed package cannot be created and uploaded or get it reviewed by without having a namespace associated with them. So basically components from third party managed packages have namespaces different from your providing organization because they want to separate the components. Sometimes there is an overlap. The names, labels are same. API names may be different, but the labels are same. So how will I understand then which component to include? And that's why we use this one. You can also review the existing components. We'll see how to use or review those existing components. But otherwise, if you navigate to your component here, and let's say remove this one, keep it only till the force.com, and after the force.com, you can simply say component reference and Again, in the component reference, you can see the name. If you want, you have a name that you want to explore, you can simply use it. So either you can directly create it like this, or this is the developers.salesforce.com. So if you remember in Visualforce also, we used to launch it from the console. So once I enable the debug mode, I can write the Visualforce directly from the browser, and there was a component reference where we used to click. So this is your library for Aura components. And here, if you see the namespaces that we talked about, Lightning, Aura, Force, there are additional like your Force Chatter. So Force Chatter is basically to integrate chatter functionality into the components. You also have a Lightning community to create those experience pages or expose your pages as an experience. And then you have the Lightning Snapping, LTNG, UI, and Wave. Wave is like Wave dashboard. So it's a analytics cloud that you can directly embed in your Lightning pages. But if you see here, see Lightning colon radio group, Lightning colon record edit form. So all these are Aura components which are part of your Lightning namespace. Why? If you see here, if I see Aura, I can see Aura colon component. So this is the namespace that is frequently used for Aura components which are part of this namespace. While you also have the Lightning. So if you see your accordion, and this documentation also provides you the code. So it provides you the sample or example so that you can also, in case you are not able to understand how to use this breadcrumb, I can see, okay, this is a basic navigation link. This is the code for it. If I want to have a on-click handler, which means I am enabling a click. So how to write it? If I'm saying I want to generate breadcrumbs with the Aura iteration, iteration is nothing but similar to your Apex repeat to iterate the collection, basically. So I have the list of names and those need to be displayed as the breadcrumbs. Breadcrumb is nothing but, if you remember or if you have seen many pages, if I go from home to component reference to lightning or breadcrumbs, it shows you that path on top here. So I can go here from parent record or parent entity. This is nothing but your breadcrumb. So it tells you from where you started and where you are currently. So these are very beautiful components that you can leverage readily with the attributes. No need to write too much of a code or too much of a styling. Salesforce will automatically do that for me. So carousel you can also add in here. See, this is my first card. This is my second card. So you can build the beautiful websites in the customer community using these lightning components. Not only community pages, but within Salesforce also you can build the UI that or user experience, rich user experience, basically. And that's why these namespaces are important. Now, another thing is, in this case, you also have a specific structure of a component bundle. But first, let's see where I can create. So, Aura still can be created from your console as well. So, if I go to the console, and here, similar to what you can see as an Apex class, Apex trigger, Visualforce page, Visualforce component, I can also create a lightning component. This is not LWC. LWC cannot be created through developer console. LWC components can only be developed through your Visualforce code or from any tooling, not from developer console. But Aura I can still create. So here I'm gonna call it as, let's say, my first Aura component. Okay. It creates a bundle, but at the same time, it also allows me to configure it. So for example, we'll talk more about this as and when it goes, but also part of the next slide that we have. But in order to expose this, to enable this to be added on as a lightning tab or allow me to add this component as a part of my lightning record page or call it from my quick action, I need to select the appropriate options here. These are configuration options. Basically, I am exposing this component so that it can be used as a lightning tag. Otherwise, it will not allow me to. Yeah, it will be simple, standalone. So for now, let's create a standalone one. I'm not using anything. If I use this and click submit, this is your first component. This is your Aura component. So if you see here, this is my component. This is the first file into that. And on the right hand side, I don't know if you can see it, but there are a lot of files which are part of this specific component that I created. In Visualforce page, if you create it using a standard controller, there is only one, that is a Visualforce page itself. But Aura contains the Aura component bundle, a bundle that provides you different types of files to support your specific component or to help you programming the lightning components. So the lightning components are defined by a component bundle which has first there is or there are rather two files. If you have exposed it as an application, there will be a .app file, which means it is an application file, or it will also have the .cmp. This is where your markup will go. Visualforce page .cmp is a Visualforce page markup representation for this one, Aura. And as you remember, Apex page, here it is Aura component, a top level or root tag that we call it as. So this is your root tag. Then I also have the second one, that is I need to write a client side code. Client side code can be written using the controller. So in controller, you write the client side code. So on button click, I want to do something. So I can invoke the code here. And if you see here, the extension is also .js. It also enables you to have a helper. Helper means helper is also .js file, but it has the JavaScript functions which can be called from any JavaScript code in a components builder, basically allowing you to share the JavaScript code. If you write it directly in controller, it is tightly coupled. If you write it in helper, it is reusable. You can also define the custom styling for this specific component, only for this component. So I can use the CSS to define and style this component. That is called a .css file. Style classes are encapsulated. So they are within the namespace so as not to conflict with any other CSS in your environment or any other components. You can also create a documentation. What is the purpose of the Aura component that you are building? So anyone who is looking at it, I can immediately understand the purpose behind it. Similar to, if you remember, we used to heavily comment our code. What was the reason for that? The explanation helps anyone who's looking at it to understand the intent. And that is what you can do through the documentation file in here, which is .aura doc. So if your component is a bit complex and the attributes that you are defining, they need something to be explicitly called out. So this component is basically being designed as a reusable component. You can even see that once you just publish it or save it in this library. So what I am basically doing, I am creating a reusable component for myself, which can be used within my org. And that is why the documentation is very important. You also have another type of a file that is called as a renderer. Renderer, again, .js file. This file allows you to handle the client side renderer to override default rendering for the component. This is your action file. Controller and helper are your action files. This is for only specific related to re-render or rendering for the page because I am into the client side. Similar to your Ajax, the Ajax functions that we have seen, Ajax components we have seen in Visualforce. Here I can write my own or override the components re-rendering part for it. Another thing is, I also want to sometimes create the component that should take the attribute from external file. So for example, if I'm embedding it on my experience community portal, I want the file to be accepting some attributes and then process those attributes. So your dot design file, this one here, the dot design file allows you or enables you to design a form that enables your end users to set the values for attributes externally. So for example, maybe from Lightning App Builder or from an experience builder. So once you have the design component, then you can set the values directly from your app builder as well. Take a simple example of a calculator. So the flow element that we used to use. What we did, input A, input B, and then button, click on the button, A and B passed to the flow, and flow handles the backend logic and then processes and displays the final result. Similarly, if I say design, that means I am enabling the components, the input fields maybe I need the attribute, the record ID to be passed on from externally. That I am doing it through the design component. And finally, you can also similar to your styling. So the styling is your CSS styling. So you're styling your components. But what if I need to include some images? So you can image or images can be included in your .svg file. So custom icon resources for your components can be uploaded under your or defined under your .svg file. So this is called bundle. Why? They all go hand in hand together. They are not individual. They work as a wired content. So all these resources in the component builder are automatically wired together. They are not standalones. The only controller that is required is your component and controller. Component is a markup, which is your user interface. So I need to have it. Definitely, without that, I cannot do anything. And second is the controller. So this is the required. Rest all are supplementary. You can think about adding or you can skip it if you don't want it. So there is no required, or let's say it is not a means to have like, okay, I have to have the helper or style or documentation or render. It's okay. You can skip it. No problem in that. But this is what a typical Aura component bundle consists of. So your typical component will have the first .cmp file or .app file. .app is when you want to include those components as a part of application, expose that application. And then you have the CSS styles. CSS styles are the ones to expose or let's say the formatting for your specific component. I can just allow inline CSS only specific to that component. You cannot access it outside. Then you have a design file which allows you to have the icons or any references which you need input from externally. So the icon I need to enter the URL externally. So I can use the design file. You have a documentation where you can add the description in case of complex components, how the component should be used with an example, similar to what Salesforce has in its own documentation. You can use the same pattern. You also have a renderer, which is a client-side renderer for overriding default rendering of a component. And this heavily uses the DOM. So now we are going to go very deep into the JavaScript. So that's why you also need to, when you are preparing, you also need to start going through the trailhead from JavaScript 1 certification. That's a must have. You can also use the W3C, but the JavaScript one that Salesforce will provide, that will align more appropriately and only focus on the things which are required from the Salesforce perspective. Then you can go deeper and go into the W3C and be the master of JavaScript. But at least on the initial level, only go with the one that Salesforce has provided. And finally, any icons, custom icons or anything that I want, I can use the SVG file. Along with that, so this is my bundle. This defines my component. Similar to how we have seen in my Visualforce, I have a dot page, which means my Visualforce markup page. I have a controller, or I can have an extension, which is nothing but my Apex file. So these were only two things which we used in Visualforce. While in Aura, it's a complete package. That's why it is called as a bundle. Bundle of different types of files performed or designed to have a specific business implementation. You can create a new component and you can now define the configuration option. So what we have said, these tags or these configuration, the one that we just see, we have seen just now, those are specifically to expose your component as either a tab page, record page, or the builder site page, which is experience site page, or your quick action. Unless you implement or you expose it as lightning tab or lightning page, it will not be available for you to drag and drop in the app builder. So again, see, there are different namespaces. This uses the force. So lightning tab, what it does in your component here, in the controller tab, similar to how you used to write the standard controller is equal to. What it does, it adds the component tag with implements force app hostable. Now, what do you understand from implement? Implements mean
Interface.
interface, exactly. So what it is doing, it is allowing me to implement the interfaces. Why? Extend can be only one. Implement can be multiple. We have seen the OOPS concepts in Apex. So basically, this is the same thing. Salesforce has defined something, you are implementing the framework. So the base framework is there, you provide the implementation part of it. So if you want to expose a page or let's say Aura component as a lightning tab, what you need to provide? Aura colon component implements forced app hostable. This tells Salesforce this needs to be exposed as a navigation element in Salesforce. So you can create a custom tab using that lightning page. Second, I can also use the lightning page itself. So the lightning app builder, you need to drag and drop the page. So in that case, you need to use the flexi page colon available for all page types. Now, when you create it first time, if I directly choose it from here, so for example, if I say lightning component and I'm saying I want this to be a tab and record page and lightning page. So I'm saying Aura exposed configuration component. And I have selected now tab, page, and record page. See what happens. See, implements force colon app hostable. That is for my tabs. Then I have for lightning page. And then finally I have for the record page. So as soon as I say record page, it is similar to using your standard controller. And standard controller, what it requires, if I use a Visualforce with a standard controller, what is the one thing that you need to provide? I mean, definitely in custom controller also required, but not a must have. Without which a standard controller page cannot be rendered. Do you remember? Recalling query string parameters? Can a standard controller or Visualforce page with a standard controller be rendered if we do not pass the ID parameter in the URL?
No, correct.
Correct? So without it, it will not work. Why? Controller is in the backend. Salesforce has written. I am not writing, but Salesforce has written it. And it still needs to render that data, correct? And in order to render that data, it needs to query the data. If you don't have the ID, how it will render? And that is why, similar to your standard controllers, if you see here the third option, when I say available for record home pages, as soon as I say the lightning record page, it also has the has record ID, which means now it is a mandate for me to pass the attribute that is record ID. Okay. We'll cover this all, but just remember this is called configuration. Configuration is to expose your Aura component either as a tab, record page, or your experience pages. So based on either you can select while creating the component, or first create the component and then after that you can also manually write it down in here. That is fine, both ways. So if you know the namespaces, you can directly include them, but otherwise you can also do it while creating the Aura components itself. Okay, so Aura uses HTML markup. That's why the first component that you see is Aura component. And it's very simple to build. So if you see here, this is already my component. Where is my component? I'll just remove all these. Let me close this one. I don't need SVG, design, JS, doc, CSS, nothing. Okay, so this is it. And I'm simply going to say H1, welcome to my first Aura page. Save it, done. Now, if you see right now, when I'm looking at the Aura component, there is an HTML tag. That's it. And I'm done. Nothing else that I have done in here. If I want to run this or if I want to open this, if I go here, see, this is my lightning page and this is my lightning component page. Now there is one difference when you do that. Now the one that we just created, where is that one? Let me just create, open directly from here. Okay, where is my page now? Okay, I'll have to directly look for it. What was the name of the component we created just now? Okay, anyways, best option, file, new, lightning. So this is my application. Why? This is my component. So I want component. So I'm gonna use it as a lightning page. Submit. Okay. So there is already a name with that. Okay, this is the name. So I can open now. So I have to use the page component. So this is my page. It implements and that's it. Simple. There is no other code that is required to use in this. Now, the most important thing is understanding which one to use when. Placing everything is also not a good practice. All the implements, because implements also means the interface has to check it. And that is why it's important that you understand how to do that. So only remember the ones which you want should be included into your Aura component. Not everything. Sometimes we may need everything. That is also fine. Not a problem into that. But otherwise, I need to use it as all the components which are required. Only those include. Now, since now we have created our first Aura component and we kept talking about the component based architecture. Now let's go into the details about the three things that we talked about. First, component. Second, your responsive UI. And third, single page architecture. So basically, whenever you are looking into the Visualforce pages are always on the server side. So Visualforce page has its own limitations when it comes to performing both the client side and server side. And the components that you build within the Visualforce page. Even though it allows you to have the templates and all those things, they are not very flexible in the reusability. And that is where your component based architecture is very helpful. So your Aura apps are all built using reusable and encapsulated components. They are reusable, but at the same time, they are encapsulated. So what does this component based architecture mean? Component based architecture means dividing your specific page into multiple smaller components, which can then be leveraged into other applications or components as well. Each component, even though is reused, the functionality that you have implemented, similar to how you do the interface implementation, that remains within that controller or within that component. And that is why it is very secure. So they are encapsulating all the functionality that is required within that component, while at the same time providing me the very reusable and replaceable component structure. So you have a lot of components. So you have application components, you have components, then you have events as well, which are triggered based on those components. And you have the interfaces. So we have seen the interfaces that we just implement. So all these are interfaces which you can implement for exposing your Salesforce, Lightning, or let's say Aura components. So these four are the base building blocks for any of your Aura component based architecture. Now we are not talking about a generic. So in general, we have seen, okay, it encapsulates the functionality and the behavior. So the benefit it provides is whenever you have a component base, it means you're providing a modularization. And whenever you have modularization, that means you're dividing your entire code base into multiple smaller chunks. Similar to how we have seen in the Apex. Instead of writing one lengthy method, it is always preferable to move the methods to separate if they do not have dependency. Second, we have also seen if the same method is being leveraged in multiple classes, you should move it to the more reusable factory patterns. So the test data factory or the trigger framework that we have seen, what those are? Those are also helping you to create the modularization of the code. Breaking down, basically component, I'm saying because it's from the user interface. And in there, I'm using the methods to modularize. But ultimately, goal and the intent is exactly the same. Reusability, flexibility, easily replace the code or modify the code without impacting the other pieces in the application. But at the same time, protecting the data within your implementation. And that is why we also need the encapsulation. And if you remember in Apex, when we started off, we also talked about the separation of the concerns. If you don't remember, let me also add one more document in there. I'll upload it in Classroom. All these documents I'll upload it in Classroom to go through and explore further. But this definitely is the base, not only for you to be a developer or an architecture. Doesn't matter which part of Salesforce role you are playing. Understanding the base architectures is very important for any language, not only Salesforce. At least on high level, you should know what exactly it follows. So the first and foremost, it follows the component-based architecture. But how that integrates into your specific lightning component? So in your lightning component, the components in lightning itself are self-contained. These are the reusable units of an app. And definitely, since they are reusable, how they are actually using the values from these components is using the HTML DOM. So if you see here, the second line itself says the components are rendered to produce HTML DOM elements within the browser. So the markup that you write is ultimately rendered as an HTML in the backend. We have seen in the Visualforce also, front end, even though I'm adding the Apex, page block table and all those things, what is that? That is a wrapper built on top of your HTML. The only thing is when I have to write 5 lines, I have to only write a 1 line. And that is how your Angular JS and other JS libraries were also evolved. So I will do the backend rendering of those 10 lines. You just write a 1 line. The same thing is happening in here as well. So in JavaScript also, or sorry, in the Visualforce also, when you write the markup, that is ultimately rendered as an HTML, except some of the tags, but most of them are rendered as an HTML, which means similar to Lightning, here also they are rendered, and they are rendered as the HTML DOM elements. You will see the table, tr, td tags, div tag, image tag, URL tag, hyperlink tag, all those tags you can see if you right click and say view page source. So when you have a Visualforce page, right click and click on view page source. You can see the code behind. You'll see the HTML. See, style. What is this? HTML. This is start tag. See, HTML. And that is why now it is more adhering and more easy to manipulate, because it is now aligned with the global standards, following all the web technological stack that I rest of the world is using basically. These are directly rendered in the browser as a DOM, but they are stored as a metadata component. So in your Salesforce org, since they are stored as a metadata, as soon as I say metadata, they are accessible through APIs as well. Again, they follow the same, your MVC architecture, model, view, and controller. So your markup is nothing but your view component, your state attributes, similar to how you defined your properties. Remember, we had the properties variables inside your Apex classes as well. And then you have the controllers, either could be a client side or a server side. So ultimately, everything is designed and supported on the base architecture principles. And then we have seen a component can also communicate with other components. So how the component will communicate with other component? Through the events. So since it is a modularized now, the two components, they need to communicate with each other through the event. So what happens when a user clicks a button, it fires an event and then tells the other component there is an event that is fired. Please catch that event and process it. So events are fired from JavaScript controller as well, and they can then register them, and then that can be used. So you can use it both ways. A parent component can also send the event that will go to your child component, or your child component can also trigger an event that needs to communicate with your parent component. So basically, this is called as a bubbling of the events. Basically, bubble up or bubble down. Bubble up means child to parent. Bubble down means parent to child. But basically, Aura is your open source JavaScript UI framework. And mostly the intent was, when it initially was designed, to support the applications in your Salesforce Mobile One app. And definitely, there are rest of the perks as well, along with making it more reusable, giving me that rich user experience, responsive designs, and so on and so forth. So a component can contain another component, or it can be embedded within an application as well. So if you have seen, even in the Aura component, while I was designing it, what happened in there? There was an outer layer that says application. So application has a URL. So a special application component which acts as a outermost container, and that can be launched as outside the context of the Salesforce app. You can also have the peer components, which can be nested inside the application component container. A loosely coupled messaging allows you to use your event-driven messaging system across the components. So even though they are modularized, they are still part of the one single application. So similar to how your components can call an Apex method using a client-side JavaScript API that will provide a service for efficient data transport. So again, that involves your server-side processing as well. That's why we said it is a client-side as well as the server-side. So if you include the JavaScript.js controller, definitely it's going to be on the client side. But at the same time, if I want a real-time data, I can also use the Apex and also make it as a server-side processing. Okay, application cannot contain application, but application can contain component. Component can contain another component. So nesting of the components is also allowed. Okay, and that's what makes it responsive as well. I'm not going to go very much in detail, but just to give you a small summary, responsive design means anything that you have automatically will be mapped into your standard format that you have in your Salesforce environment. So if you see here, SLDS, the design system that I was talking about, the Salesforce design system, Lightning design system, I can directly use it. Ultimately, again, similar to your HTML, will be rendered as a CSS markup in the backend. But I can use SLDS column, SLDS size 1 of 1, or size, let's say, 1 of 2, where I'm saying 2 columns and this is the first column. Then you have a second column. Font style, wrap, everything that is as a part of Salesforce provided into the library itself, tightly coupled into the library. Simply use it and you're done. This also makes the layout easy to be adaptable on any system, any device. So I am not building a device specific style sheets now. Previously, we used to have the JavaScript code in our applications. Even in Visualforce page, we had to do that. So sometimes, as I mentioned, there was some feature which was not working in browser version XYZ. So we had to write a JavaScript that will fetch me the browser, the version, and then make sure to display the message this browser is not compatible with this application feature. And that is why responsive UI is very important. Responsiveness is not only how faster and how easy it is to navigate. Responsiveness is also in terms of how easily you can make the component adaptable to any device, any system that is available. Okay. And finally, your single page application. What does that mean? So now I have spoke about the first one, that is my component. So component based architecture is where I'm creating simple components and then nesting them or embedding them so that I can have a one big container. But now the traditional applications were having multiple pages which were communicating with each other. Separate page, separate function for each of the pages. That's why this is also called as a multi-page application. While the architecture that we are talking about, that is called is an single page application, which means page content is manipulated behind the scenes using client-side JavaScript and appearance is of different pages, but ultimately it's a one big single application. So applications, those are expected to run on variety of mobile services or mobile devices. They will mostly benefit from this web-based development approach because they require the alternate display behavior for inconsistent form factors or not supported form factors and the page transitions that are like gesture based or action based. This is the approach that lies at the heart of your Salesforce One technology. Salesforce One is a mobile app for Salesforce. So, with the heavy adoption of Ajax and the growing desire for the browser based applications, providing a sophisticated user experience has led to rapid evolution of your single page architecture. But it's not easy to build these SPAs. It requires an expert knowledge on HTML5 or HTML now in general, whatever version we are currently on, CSS, JavaScript, SDKs for mobile or mobile UI design patterns, security of the data that needs to be transferred, data serialization, deserialization, and service oriented architecture technologies and the best practices. But the beauty of the SP architecture is that implementation is encapsulated, like it is very well hidden. So with the complexity are abstracted in the metadata layer, allowing my administrators to easily configure mobile page layouts. So behind the screen, I don't need to implement a single page architecture. Salesforce has already embedded and implemented as a part of your Lightning framework. But you should at least know what exactly a single page architecture means. So if you see the lows and highs of a single page application, definitely since I am on the same page, it is faster for the processing. Navigation is very easy and smooth. While the traditional websites may not completely support your SPS. Plus, as I mentioned, it is based on a expertise. So implementation of the single page architecture will be an issue. But in my cases, I just need to use the lightning, so I don't need to worry too much about it. But overall, your aura is very powerful, and it was the first to be launched for mobile one application. And that is why all these architectures are already embedded as a part of it, which is making it more compatible for any device, any browser. No complications. Okay. So we have created the first component, but the bundle and all those files, how you can leverage on the high level. Let's do it tomorrow. And then tomorrow we'll also see how your visual force differs from your typical Aura components that you develop. Okay. In a first glance, it might seem like too much of a knowledge to grasp, but as you do a hands-on, you'll find it is very easy, not that complex. The only thing that you need to do is definitely, unlike previously when in Visual Force you only need to learn the HTML basics of JavaScript and mostly Apex and Salesforce Visual Force. That's it. So even if I don't have much experience on the JavaScript or I'm not very pro into that, it is easier to even build applications or components using your Visual Force. But now the thing is, especially the web application developers, they are already using all these tech stacks. So it is very easy for them to build the lightning. Why this was also launched was one of the reason was when the initial Salesforce platform was launched. I need to have the Apex. Apex is specialized language for Salesforce. Visual Force specialized language for Visual Force, Salesforce. Sorry. So whenever I'm looking for the skill set, I have a specific language requirements. But now, even if a person who has a web application development experience, he can learn and he can build the lightning components because he's already a pro in HTML, CSS, JavaScript, Angular, JS. All those tech stacks, he is already aware of it. The architecture, the frameworks. The only way is a markup that I'm using that is different. It's a wrap up. Angular JS is what? Typical JS that is wrapped up, and instead of 10 lines, you just write one line. I will write the 10 lines in the backend for you. So putting up the wrappers for easy users. That's it. Okay. So let's stop here for today. And tomorrow we'll continue with the next Aura component. So we'll actually build a component. We have just seen how to create it, but tomorrow we'll explore the component builder further. Right. So let's stop here for today and we'll continue tomorrow.